Thanks for taking the break. Someone said I didn't give the last two Psalms, 12 and 13, and they were 68 and 72. I got all wrapped up telling you about 68, and I forgot 72. Messiah is the triumphant king. 72, we get the hymn, Yeshua shall reign wherever the sun, wherever its successive journeys run, his kingdom spread from shore to shore, till moon shall wane and wax no more. That comes out of Psalm 72. I did an article recently in the JETS, Journal of Evangelical Theological Society, on Psalm 72. And because of the hyperbole there, I illustrated how the Antiochian community saw in the promise and in the means by which God kept that alive, the fulfillment and the fulfillments that came later on. So 68 and 72 make up number 12 and number 13. We began, as we concluded, we were talking about the rabbinic view. For example, in the Babylonian Talmud, the rabbinic view that Messiah was, I love this, that Messiah was called a leper scholar. This is because of Isaiah 53 verse 4. Surely he has borne our grief and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him, they translated it, a leper, smitten of God and afflicted. Later in the 2nd century AD, the rabbinic model turned to two messiahs. I mentioned at Qumran, a king and a priest. But they said, no, a king and a general. A king and a general. And the general was generally designated Mashiach ben Yosef. And the king, or no, they also used Mashiach ben Ephraim. But the general Messiah was the peer at the end of the age prior to the appearance of Mashiach ben David. But this leads us into the whole discussion of the prophets. And the latter prophets, 16 prophets, 4 major, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, and then the 12 minor prophets, which doesn't mean they were Bush League or they were A-class, but they really were shorter. Matter of fact, if you put all 12 of the minor prophets together, it's about 70 pages of Hebrew text, whereas Isaiah is over 100 pages in and of itself. So there is a shortening there. But I'm going to go, first of all, to what I think are the two earliest prophets, though this is debated, Joel and Obadiah. I think they are 9th century, that is 800s BC, though, again, I say this cannot be stated with certainty. And one of the first ones I would argue for, which when the NIV came out, they had it straight. But by 1984, they changed it. In Joel 2:23, be glad, O people of Zion, rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given you the teacher for righteousness. The teacher for righteousness. So Joel speaks of God sending Messiah as Ha-Moreh. But it's so very close to another word which looks like Moreh, it's the word rain. And so now in 1984 edition, they say, he has given you the autumn rain for righteousness. It's true. What follows, he sends both abundant showers, both autumn and spring rains, as before. Now the word as before is barishon, at first. Then he's going to follow that in 2:28 and afterwards, acharid. So at first, he's going to send immediate blessings. But afterward, there's that now and not yet, the already and the not yet. And so this particular book is a very, very important one to notice here. So I'm going to put Joel, as I'm saying, about 800s. And here God gives a call to repent, and he gives it, for example, in 1:13 and 14. There is the first call there. Put on sackcloth, O you priest, and wail, you who minister before the Lord. Come and spend the night in sackcloth. But then again, he gives another call, and that's in chapter 2, verse 13 and 14. He says, rend your heart, not your garments. Why are you splitting your garments? Rend your heart, get the pericardium. Now, he means that figuratively. This is speaking hyperbolically. Return to the Lord. There's your great word for shuv. Do a 180. Return to the Lord, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, full of chesed, you see, abounding in chesed, and he relents from sending calamity. But then, as you come to these two calls, then in 2:18, there is the response. Then the Lord, Adonai was, he was jealous, and he took pity, and he answered, and he said, and I'm arguing all of these are in a yiktol form. Yiktol form. So it has to be translated here as a past tense, not as everyone, New American Standard, NIV, and others put this together, because what follows then immediately from this repentance, which took place up here, though called twice, there was repentance, and then from 2:19 all the way down to 2:27, you have the now aspects, the immediate response. And the immediate response is the now. But he goes on and speaks in the 2:28 through 3:21 afterward, or in that day, So Joel, which out of these a few verses here, let's see, over half of the book is found in all the other prophets. They quote him repeatedly. So I think that it is the earliest of the various ones that should be listed here. But in the verse 23, there is this reference to the Messiah. The Messiah as the teacher of righteousness. The other night I was having dinner with Michael Radelnik, and Michael says we're going to do a encyclopedia of prophetic materials, and he said, would you do Joel 2:28, because you're the only one I have ever seen who has done that it is a teacher of righteousness. Then let's move on. I'm just picking and choosing here to the 8th century. If that's 9th century prophets, then let's go to 4 prophecies from 3 other writing prophets, Hosea, Amos, and Micah. Yes?
Are you saying that the teacher of righteousness was in the now as well?
Yes and no. There was the prediction that he would come and bring this upon the land, of which they're beginning to see some of the evidence now. But no, the not yet is when Messiah himself shall come. So thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, comment.
The teacher of righteousness is not a construct chain.
A construct chain? You have those, yes. But how would you read it then?
Well, it's just saying it's ha-moret, leads stuck up. Ha-moret, definite article, leads stuck up. Not teacher, for or for the sake of righteousness.
But a teacher,
It's not a Hebrew construct chain.
I can't quite hear you.
It's not a Hebrew construct chain.
Well, it's a participle, yeah. But the participle doesn't have the construct ending on it. It's your point.
It's also got the definite article on it.
Well, I would expect a definite article since it is the ha-moret. Yeah. So I would expect that. But then the only difference then would be the teacher. And then rather than translating for or of, which would be your objection, then I would say maybe the righteous one, using that position. A righteous one. 23. 2:23. 2:23. Yes.
I think for later Hebrew, it would be more likely to be a replacement of construction.
More likely to be a replacement of.
Old way of construction with little accent on the first one, big one on the next one.
Yeah.
Vowel dropping.
Yeah. Those of you who have the, I should have brought my Hebrew text along with me. Those of you who have the Hebrew text, does that have underneath ha-moret a conjunctive or disjunctive accent? Do you know the difference? What is it?
It's a
Disjunctive?
It's a deep
Tifka? That sets it apart then. Well, that bears out your point then. Yeah. But I don't think it takes away from the meaning. Well, number one, that gives the Masoretic understanding from, say, 6th century following. So you have to take that. But that's not of the same value as the consonantal text. So it has to be factored in, but it's not determinative. Yes?
My Shabbat class, we went through Joel, and I was using Matthew Henry. And Matthew Henry translated that and understood it to mean teacher of righteousness.
Yeah. It's the older interpretation, but all moderns have given it up because what follows is the reign. But every place you have the messianic doctrines, there is also an abundance of rain that comes along with that, whether it be metaphorically the downpour of the Holy Spirit or whether it be actually physically of the rains that brought relief. We're in a year throughout the whole United States in which it's burning up, and like Texas and the Southwest last year, which were so dry, it looks like, even though we're just at not quite at the middle point of summer, we may have one of our driest summers yet. That may be another one of those things we're speaking about that connects with the calamities that are there. Those who were trying to raise cattle had to get rid of all their cattle in Texas because all of the forage and the hay and grass was gone, even though they trucked it in. We were trucking it from Wisconsin down to Texas. But now we've got our second cutting of hay off, but it looks right now that we've had in the last 60 days less than an inch of rain total, and we should have 5 inches. So.
Does that make Al Gore a teacher of righteousness?
and also the inventor of the website. Well, let's go. Hosea, I want to look at first of all, chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. We're just in Joel. Let's go back to Hosea 3, 4, and 5. Hosea, you remember, is one who the Lord called, and it tells us the word of the Lord came to him during the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. There is an attempt here to say, God said to Hosea, go marry this woman, Gomer, who is a harlot. Gomer here is not the same as Gomer Pyle. That's a different one. This is a woman here. But I think what you have is a reference to go take for yourself a wife. That expression is a Hebraic expression, get married. So the command is get married. But then what the woman, the wife became later on, because it is said, and children of harlotry too. The children were born subsequently. So you have a packed sentence here, which many take, almost all of the conservative, they say, God told him to marry a harlot. I can't understand how they would say that when God has rules against that. You say, yeah, but it's grace, but that doesn't illustrate grace. At this point, it illustrates going right against his own law. So there are a number of things here that make me think that she actually was married. They had a nice marriage going, and they had 1 child born, 2 children born, 3 children born, and she bore, verse 3, to him a son, and he names all 3. You only name them when you're the daddy. So I take it he's the father. But then she says, yeah, I could really earn my own living. And she goes out as a temple prostitute and earns her wool, linen, oil, and drink, verse 5 of chapter 2. And finally, the Lord tells him, go and love your wife again. So he sends him back to this wife. Now, she can't be married to someone else. Deuteronomy 25 is clear on that. You're married to someone else, that stops a remarriage. But apparently she wasn't. So love her again as the Lord loves the Israelites. Only there had to be a time of setting apart, of cleanness, and he buys her back for 30 shekels of silver. Prices have gone up. Yeah. Joseph was sold for 20, now 30. By the time we get into intertestamental later it'll be 125 or more. So he said, you live with her many days, and then verse 4, because the Israelites will live many days without a king, without a prince, without a sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or even idol, which they have. You know, one thing Jewish people have never gotten into since the Babylonian thing is idolatry. That is open idolatry. Oh, there is the subtle kind, which is consumerism and that kind of thing there. But afterward, the Israelites will return and seek the Lord, the God, and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. So it's not only Isaiah who says this in 9, 10, 11 in Romans. It's not only Paul who says this in Romans 9, 10, 11. All Israel will be saved. He sees it here. And he says they'll seek Adonai, their God, and David, their king. David here is being used as the title and the office, but there is a second David, Mashiach himself. And so we are told here that the kingship, the throne, and the dynasty that had been promised to David is now being picked up. David was promised at 1,000. Now we're down in the 800s, and God is still remembering it and still posting it at that time. Let's go to Amos chapter 9, another 8th century prophet, chapter 9, verse 11. In that day, I will restore David's fallen tent. So there's coming a day when the house of David, which was given a dynasty, is a Nophalim. It's falling, or Nophel. It's collapsing. And he doesn't call it here a bayit, a house. He calls it a sukkah, a tent. And God says, I will repair its broken places. Now, it's too bad English doesn't follow closely here, because the suffix on broken places or broken apart is feminine plural. Yeah, but there's nothing feminine plural here as an antecedent. Oh yeah, there is the word kingdoms, it's feminine and it's plural, north and south. So I'll repair north and south, and I will restore his ruins. It says again, its ruins. No, it's third masculine singular this time. And I will build her. It's feminine singular. It was masculine singular, now it's feminine singular. And I'll rebuild her as she used to be. Why? So that they may possess the remnant of Edom, even all the nations that bear my name. Now, bearing the name of the Lord is to have God's name called over. That expression is used in both Testaments. When David called his name over a city, when God called his name over the tabernacle, he owned them. David owned it, the Lord owned it. When God calls his name over his people, then he owns them. So, also, this is a passage which in the Greek and in the Dead Sea Scrolls reads here very quickly that all the Goyim that bear my name may seek Adonai. May seek Adonai. All the nations that bear my name may seek the Lord. I told you the difference between this word here for Edom is same as man or mankind, Adam. It's just the pointing, Edom, Seglet, or Adam, A class as opposed to E class there, vowel. And the word for possess, Yarash, or Darash. Darash. Yarash is seek, Darash is seek, Yarash is to possess. So it is just the tail on the ancient writing. Hebrew is written in the Aramaic square script from the 5th century on. But before that time, this would be